what is poppin'? Today we are talking some palettes. Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna get that later, but we are going to be talking about the top palettes of the decade. That's right, not the year, the decade. You know, I've been seeing a lot of best products of 2019 videos in my feed, and I've been loving them, but there's a lot of them out there, and I decided, why not do something different? Why not take it to another level? Why not do a spin? So I'm going to be talking about well, products will take forever if I start talking about that of the decade because there's a lot, but I decided to talk about, at least in my opinion, what I think are the top 5 palettes of the decade between 2010 and 2020. So between those 10 years, I'm going to be talking about what I think are the products, the palettes that shook the industry, that really set it out for these brands, that were really hyped about, that were actually worth the hype, and that are all that. So without further ado, I don't want to make this intro any longer, and let's get right into it. So I'm not going to be going in any particular order. I'm just going to start off with the first palette in the little stash that I made, the little stack. So all these palettes, the order I'm going, it's not rating it from like best to worst. These are all 5 in their own positions, in their own spots over the decade. It's more towards the, like, you know, 2015, 2020 type of little era. It's not so much 2010, 2015, just because I don't think there were as many as launches back then as like that were as exciting as the launches between 2015 and 2020, and I was also not into makeup back then. So we're talking about the newer stuff in the decade. So first off, the Friendcation Desi and Katy palette by Dose of Colors. They collabed on this palette. This is the round 2 palette. It is not the round 1. The round 1 just had a quad of 4 eyeshadows. This is the big legit palette. I'm pretty sure this is the only palette of Dose of Colors that's an actual 10-pan eyeshadow palette that just has strictly eyeshadows. Why I think this really shook the decade was, first off, Desi and Katy did an amazing job with the palette. But not only that, Dose of Colors formula is amazing. So for the formula, I think this palette really hit it off, and this was Dose of Colors' first actual palette, I'd say, like real, like with lots of colors eyeshadow palette. So I think this is definitely holding a spot in the decade, and just look at it. Like, come on guys, it is stunning. I use and abuse this palette like no tomorrow. I mean, can you, like, come on, it is a stunning, oh my god, did I chip my blue? Okay, as you can see, I have used and abused this. This blue one is so beautiful because it has kind of a purple undertone. The green one has a gold undertone. The black one has a silver undertone. Just a Kiss is so beautiful if you want to go for that natural sparkle all over your lid. That is so stunning. This palette, the mattes are very creamy and blendable and amazing, but in my opinion, the shimmers are one of the most shimmery shimmers I've ever seen. Like, I own no palette with shimmers like this. Like, these shimmers are really the best of the best. Let me go ahead and swatch Just a Kiss for you. It is a beautiful shade. And let me also do Dirty Money. The shade names to the shades and everything, they really did a great job. Desi and Katy, they collaborated. And let me tell you, they really put their minds to work because this palette really is so stunning. As you can see, can you see that pigment and that high shine? I promise you, in person it's even more shiny. It is actually pretty insane. Do you see like that gold undertone? Dirty Money, if you have brown eyes, I swear it's going to flatter your eyes so well. It makes like the hazel in brown eyes come out. It's just so stunning. So yeah, that is why I think the Desi x Katy palette, Friendcation palette, is definitely one of the top 5 palettes of the decade. Next, this palette, guys. I think everybody knows what this palette is. How can you possibly not mention this palette when talking about the top palettes of the decade? This shook the industry. A few years ago, I'd say 3 years ago, everybody had this palette. There was nobody that didn't have this palette when it launched. It was really like a decade slash like year breaking palette. This really set it out for ABH. Anastasia Beverly Hills really like went up and soared high after this palette. They did an amazing job with this palette. It was the perfect warm neutral cranberry palette, and first off, the packaging and the formula, oh my god. Now I gotta admit, this palette is one of my most fallouty palettes in my collection. It definitely has a lot of fallout, but because of the pigment and the blendability, it makes everything worth it. It is honestly so stunning. As you can see, I've used and abused this. I'm telling you, literally everybody owns this palette. You cannot go wrong with this palette. It is really a stunner, especially if you're into warm tones. And warm tones were like a huge trend like a year or two ago. Even now, warm tones are it. So this was the perfect warm tone palette, especially from the ABH formula. It was honestly a like stunner. It was a palette. So of course I had to mention this. I'm going to swatch Red Ochre. And I'm going to swatch, I don't know, maybe I should do a shimmer. Should I do Primavera? So you guys can see. And as you can see, I really have like used and abused it. The pans are stunning too. I love like the box shape of them. It's so pretty. Look at that shimmer. Like look at that shine though. Like that's insane. Alright, and let's go in with them. Oh my god, that pigment! Holy pigment, that is insane. I did kind of go in a couple times, but that is because the pan is smaller, but I went very lightly. But as you can see, oh my god, like guys, if you don't have this palette right now, I don't think you were into makeup during this century. I mean, not this century, this decade, for sure. The next palette, can you see the peak over there? I think you already know. You know, I bet you already knew that I was going to mention this, like, you know. There's really no surprise here. We have the Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star Conspiracy palette. This is the newest one in all of these palettes. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Everybody is either wanting this palette or either has this palette. The packaging is pretty insane. I definitely think it is the most beautiful palette packaging-wise, like outer packaging-wise, of the decade for sure. Like, I mean, come on. What palette looks like this? Like, for real. It is pretty insane. And, of course, we dive in. And here it is. Now, this palette, more than the actual color scheme, I think this palette is a big one in the decade, hype-wise. So, everybody wanted this palette. The Shane and Jeffree series built it up with, like, the excitement and like the want and need for this palette for so long. So everybody wanted it. Everybody that doesn't have it still wants it. It is a hot and running item. It broke Jeffree Star's website. It was pretty insane. So this definitely did kind of like, you know, actually break the internet. And I think breaking the internet is like safe and sound enough to say that it is one of the top 5 palettes of the century. It is definitely the top palette of this year for sure. The formula is stunning. I do love the colors. At first, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I do have a couple tutorials up on my YouTube channel if you haven't seen it yet. But at first, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. But the more I use it, the more I love it. It is honestly an amazing palette. And you really don't know how good it is until you use it and like create different looks out of it for sure. I did decide, basically if I had the Tati Beauty palette, I would include it in this video, but unfortunately I do not have that palette. It was either between me buying this one or the Tati Beauty one, and I definitely went for this one because of like the crazy hype about it, but I definitely do want the Tati one. If I did have that, I would definitely include it in this video because I've seen it. I've used one of my friends before and it is a stunning palette. It is gorgeous and I think it definitely is kind of close to the bar with this one. Not hype wise, but color wise and, you know, shaking the industry kind of wise. But this is a beautiful palette. If you own this palette, congratulations. You have the most hyped palette of the decade. The last 2 palettes are of course palettes from Morphe brushes. I mean, could you do a top 5 palettes of the decade without mentioning Morphe palettes? Alright, so I'm just going to take, well, you guys want to take a good guess? I mean, it's pretty obvious. Okay, so we're going to start off with the Jaclyn Hill palette. It is definitely one of the most groundbreaking palettes in the makeup history of like forever. Because this is definitely the palette that I really think took Morphe to like its highest level that it is right now. Like Morphe is the it brand. For whatever reason, everybody has their own opinions about Morphe. Some love it, some think it's overhyped, or whatever it is. This palette is not overhyped. This palette is worth the hype. This one really did shake the industry. I feel like anybody of any sort of look that they're going for, any age, this palette is for them. My mom uses this palette. My mom is a bit older. She likes a little I guess, more neutral colors. My cousin, who barely wears makeup, has this palette. It's her go-to palette. It's pretty much the only palette she uses, and I, as a like makeup lover and makeup enthusiast, also love this palette and use this palette for looks. To date, I've actually hit pan on one of the shades. You see how messy my palettes are? I'm telling you, I'm only talking about the palettes I've really used and abused. First off, let's just look at the shade selection. I mean, you got all the warm tones, you got some neutral tones, you really have day to night looks that you can create out of this. You have bridal, you have editorial, you have pops of color right here. You literally have everything in this palette. That's why I think this palette really did shake the industry, not because it has Jaclyn Hill's name on it, but because it really is one of the most I definitely think it is the most thought out Morphe palette for sure. But not only that, but Morphe also changed their formula with this palette. I think they collaborated, and this formula is much better than the Morphe brushes formula previous to this palette coming out. These shimmers, the way they glide on the mattes, how creamy they are and how they blend. I love how you can build them all up to however you want. It's not difficult to blend out. Like my cousin, she doesn't do makeup. She only uses one brush for her makeup, yet like it looks flawless on her and it blends so easily. It has some amazing shades. I think each shade was definitely well thought out, and it definitely just has like your basics, to be honest, with some fun in it. So for sure, this palette had to be in the top 5. I'm going to go ahead and swatch, okay, this red shade. You know, each shade, I'm pretty sure, I don't think each shade, like, different, like, but I don't, okay, I'm mumbling. Basically, I don't think that all of these eyeshadows have one formula. I think some of them are completely different, but I don't think each shade has a different formula, you know? I think some of them are consistent, but some of them are a little different according to what the color is, which I really love, that it's not just one basic formula, because some shades do need some different formulas. Sometimes, you know, they require a little more pigment or a little less pigment, you know, depending on what it is. But you see how this kind of just melts and like beautifully swatches. And I've had this palette is probably expired. Okay, I'm gonna be really honest. This palette has probably been in my drawer for like 2-3 years now, but I still love it. I still use it. The quality is still the same. It's still consistent, and it's amazing. Let me swatch this duochrome for you. This duochrome is really pretty. It's like pink, but it has like a gold flip. It's so stunning. Let me show you guys. Oh yeah. And I'm like barely pressing down hard. Do you see how like beautiful that stunning gold flip is? Oh, this shade is so magical. Especially if you're going for some bridal glam, put like the lighter gold, and then put this, and then kind of do like a brown / smoky like outer corner, and oh my god, it'll be so gorgeous. But you see what I get, like what I mean. This palette is really a stunner. I've been talking about this palette for a while, but this one I did have to talk about a lot because I really do think it really did shake the industry. The last palette that I have to talk about is the Morphe X James Charles palette. Now, I've got to say it was really hard to pick out top 5 palettes. I was thinking like Tartelette and Bloom. I was thinking a Huda Beauty palette, but I was thinking not just hype-wise or name-wise or formula-wise, I was thinking more of brand-wise, like what I think helped forward the brand, what I think made it get to where it was today, or what I think everybody kind of owns in their collection. You know, not everybody owns like Huda Beauty palettes or Tartelette palettes, especially right now, because I know the Tartelette palettes are a little older and Tarte has died down a bit. I wanted to talk more about like current and running palettes that I think that people still use till date and have their own like specialty and own place in the makeup industry because of like a unique concept, you know? So the James Charles palette, I think, holds a place in the decade of palettes, not because of the hype, not because it has James Charles' name on it. I mean, it obviously got bigger because it has James Charles' name on it for sure. I mean, yeah, his name basically really did put it out there and make it big. I mean, this palette wouldn't be as big if it was a normal Morphe palette and didn't have his name on it. But, I mean, like, if you keep his name aside for like a minute, right? Like, just forget that it's his palette for like just 1 second. Not 1 second, like 30 seconds, okay? Just forget that it's his palette and look at the palette. I mean, I haven't seen a palette with this big of an array of colors, this many options. If you do colorful looks, if you are an Instagram makeup enthusiast, you have all your pops of color. I know especially like people who love to play with color, this is their go-to palette. They don't use other palettes. Formula wise, it isn't my favorite. I do like formulas. I do think there are better formulas out there, but color wise, color range wise, I do think it is one of the most well thought out and well, I guess, covering all different, you know, spaces type of palette, because you have your neutrals out here, you have some warm tones. Your most used like shades are the bigger pans, a white, a black, transition shades, a beautiful shade that you can use as a highlighter, but then you also have some fun warm tones on top, and you also have like, you know, some normal neutrals, but then at the bottom it's like every makeup like enthusiast's dream that loves color to have this on the bottom. And of course, with all, I mean, you can't do all of your looks with just pop of colors. You know, there's palettes that are literally just colors, but to blend it out, you need those transition shades. You need a good black. You need a good white to set that base, or you need some nice shimmers that you can do, but you could also do like a warm look like this, do something smoky and use like that gold. So color-wise, color range-wise, and I guess the most for your money wise, I do think this palette definitely holds a place in the makeup industry and really does set the bar kind of high. Like I said, not my most favorite formula. I definitely do like the Jaclyn Hill palette's formula a bit better. That one I like a little bit more formula wise, and more actual like beginners makeup, like just day-to-day wearer type of palette. This is more like makeup enthusiasts, you know, like more of a someone who does Instagram makeup or any type of makeup. I think this palette is more for that. Let me swatch some of them. This is the duochrome glitter shade. It's like this mermaid type of looking, like it's purple but then has a blue undertone. I also want to swatch this beautiful copper shade, and then let's also swatch a pigment. Let's do this beautiful deep maroon, pinkish maroon. And all of these palettes that I mentioned today, I'm pretty sure I do have at least one video tutorial up with all of them. Sorry, I do dig in my fingers into palettes for swatches a lot. I don't know, it's kind of just habit. I do love the most pigment that I can get. That is the copper shade. And then this is the purple. This is more of a topper, so it's not as pigmented. It kind of just has sparkles to kind of just top on top of your look. So you can use any of the mattes and then just top this on top and it'll look stunning. Whether you use purple, the purple will come out more, or if you use blue, that will come out more. And then here is a matte for you to see. These are pressed pigments, at least the more colorful shades that are mattes. So it is more pigment and it is a bit more difficult to blend. But if you use an eyeshadow primer, I'm sure the mattes and pressed pigments will give you no problem. You kind of just have to work with it and kind of press it more onto your lid rather than kind of just go in and blow it out. You know what I mean? Because then the pigment kind of just disappears. But if you pack it on and be a little bit more precise, you should have no problem with an eyeshadow primer. So you do have to work with it a bit. But once you do, it is a stunning palette. And I do think because of the color range, it is holding a big spot in the palettes for the decade. So I hope you guys liked my breakdown / rundown of all my top palettes of the decade. Definitely let me know down below what your top palettes are for the decade. These are mine. But, you know, I'm curious to know what are your guys' top ones. If you guys think different, if you don't think one of these belong in the top, at least top 10 of the decade. Or let me know if you have any palette that goes like way back, like 2014 back, that you think might deserve a place in the top 10, I'd say, of the decade. Or if there's any palette that you think is a staple in your life, like that you've discovered over the decade but isn't really hyped about or talked too much about, like something that is kind of underrated, I guess. Definitely let me know down below. I would love to hear your thoughts and what your palettes might be. I had so much fun doing this rundown / breakdown of all these palettes. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon in my next one. It's always such a great time talking makeup with you guys. It's so nice, honestly. Like, it's a lot of fun. Love this. Great time. And, you know, I hate talking to actual people. I hate people in general because I'm not the best with social stuff, but talking to a camera really eases it off, and, you know, I love it. So, here we are. Okay. Bye now. Love you all.